Lace knitting is beautiful with open stitch work. Today we're going to teach you how to read a pattern and a chart because many times you only see a chart for lace or find one in another language. We're featuring the Winter Lace Afghan from the Beginner's Guide to Lace Knitting with permission and courtesy from Leisure Arts. We'll be reading the pattern and the chart plus working it up on the needles today on GoodKnit Kisses. You're watching part 1. Welcome to GoodKnit Kisses. We're all about helping you stitch your love and love your stitches. This is the third video in a series of how to read a pattern, and because we've already done 2 before, I want to point out these 2 videos. You can click on the link in the description below because in this one we are going to fast forward straight to learning how to read the chart and special stitches. So we've got the I Can't Believe I'm Knitting, the updated edition by Leisure Arts, and you're working the basic hat pattern. Okay, so you're going to learn about that basic shaping. And then in the Knitting for the Cure book, we are working a mug cozy. So you've got that really pretty ribbon design there and learning how to seam things up. Today's book is Beginner's Guide to Lace Knitting, brought to you by Leisure Arts, and Rita Weiss is the designer. There's lots of helpful tips in here, plus multiple patterns. The patterns actually range from not beginner, but easy and intermediate, and there's one experienced in the book. However, if you are a beginner and you've learned to read patterns before and you're ready to move the next level, this is definitely the book for you because it will get you from that beginner stage to more advanced things. If you are just knitting for the first time, be sure and click on our link down below for learning how to knit some of the basic stitches, and you'll be ready to do this in no time. Because I'm covering the entire pattern and chart with you today, I believe that a beginner can do this pattern. This will jump you into bigger projects and more intricate projects, but it is nice and quick. We're actually working with Lion Brand Thick and Quick yarn. This is Heartland, and in the sample that's here on the page is actually using Lion Brand Woolies Thick and Quick. So thank you, Lion Brand, for providing this. It's a super bulky weight yarn. We're working with a US 11 needle or 8 millimeter. Mine's a 40-inch needle from tip to tip. This is 29-inch that they're recommending. So a 29-inch, size 11, 8 millimeter circular knitting needle. You'll also want a large-eyed yarn needle for weaving in the ends, or if you want to install a lifeline, plus you'll want some scrap yarn to install the lifeline, or some floss or a thread, plus stitch markers. I'm using 2 in here and it's going to help me. I'll show you where to use that. Let's begin. I do want to go over some of the tips that they call out in the book, actually say to work up a swatch, and I totally agree. So I will go over that as well. It also goes over blocking and things like that in the book. To download the book, you can go down in the link below and click there. It'll probably go to our blog and then give you all the other links for everything. You can get this book in the stores or online at leisurearts.com. Be sure and listen to the whole video first before you move on, pausing on the second time around to get all the information that you can, and you'll be more familiar with hearing it the second time around. The Afghan is going to be approximately 46 inches by 54 inches, or 117 centimeters by 137 centimeters, using the super bulky weight yarn and the size 11 needles. In approximately your tension, it'll change the size a little bit. But in order to determine it for a different size, or to make sure your needle size is right, you will make a gauge swatch. For lace knitting, it's really important to make a gauge swatch, one, because you want to make sure that your yarn behaves the way you want it to and looks right, but also to make sure your project turns out the right size. So what we're referring to here is the lace stitch work, which is right here, the lace pattern. But first, we're going to cover all the pattern stitches. The pattern stitches are a seed stitch coupled with the lace stitch, and together they make up the blanket. You're actually going to be working the seed stitch along this border here, the beginning border, and then the border on the outside on the left and right edges, okay? And then the middle is going to be the lace work. Now, before we get there, we've got a stitch guide that covers the slip slip knit, which is a left leaning decrease. And then we have the SK2P, which is slip 1, knit 2 together, PSSO, which is passes slip stitch over. The knit 2 together is that right leaning decrease. And that's what causes these leans here. This is what causes these going over to the right and these here going over to the left. If you notice on one row, I've got these left leaning decreases over here and they're on the right, but when I get up here, actually these left leaning decreases become on this side of my knitting. So they're throughout the pattern. They go back and forth on different rows, and you're going to want to knit up a swatch to be able to see how that works up, but also how it behaves with the yarn that you choose. The pattern stitches, there is the seed stitch here that has that border, and that is a knit purl across, and then you add a knit one at the end, and that's worked over an odd number of stitches. And on row 2, you knit the purls and purl the knits, and then you just repeat row 2 for the seed stitch throughout the pattern where it's called for on the seed stitch. And that's pretty simple, and you may have done that in another pattern before. We're going to put that together with the lace pattern, and the lace pattern of course is in the middle, and then you're going to have the seed stitch on either side. But when you're reading the lace pattern, it doesn't actually show the seed stitch because it's just showing the lace pattern. So again, go check out the other videos on how to read a pattern, and I kind of go over some of that. This is getting a little bit more advanced. The instructions for the actual pattern over here. So you're going to work the circular needle because of the larger number of stitches, and you're working back and forth as if working on straight needles. We cast on 95 stitches, and then we're going to work rows 1 through 5 in the seed stitch. So you're referencing down here, these seed stitches down here. For row 6, you're working the seed stitch as established over the first 5 stitches, which gets you this edge over here, and then you purl the last 5 stitches. So we're getting this back area. The wrong side is actually going to be more of the reverse stockinette, so it's all purls on the back. And then you work the seed stitch in the last 5 stitches of the row. Okay, so that is going to set you up to start working row 7. Row 7 is where you actually have a seed stitch beginning, and then you have your lace pattern, and then you have the seed stitch ending. So the first and last 5 stitches are going to be seed stitch, and that's why I have 2 stitch markers, because you can separate those areas and just visually show yourself that the first and last stitches are going to be in seed stitch. It makes it much easier. So row 7 says, keeping the first and last 5 stitches in seed stitch, work row 1 of lace pattern over 85 stitches. So you still have 95 stitches, it's just that 10 of them are worked in seed. And then you just continue keeping the first and last 5 stitches in seed stitch, working the lace pattern over the center 85 stitches until 8 repeat of the rows 1 through 20 of the lace pattern have been completed. So you're going to be working this, rows 1 through 20, 8 times. And then you work 5 rows in seed stitch and bind off and weave in the ends. So down here is this key and the chart. The chart is a baby version of all this written out here. It makes it so much easier to see, and you can actually visualize what the pattern is going to look like. So right here you can see all the stitches we talked about. We have the slip slip knit, which is the left leaning decrease. You can see all these stitches here that have this little slash, this diagonal line through it. Right here is the key, and it shows that little slash. Okay, so it's going this direction. You see how it's pointing for you? It's like having a little arrow on your chart here. This one is flipped the opposite direction, and it adds a little bitty line through it, like a little T. That one right there. That's the knit 2 together, and those are the right leaning decreases, and you can see how it shows it on the pattern here. There is one that's different, and it's a couple of places in the pattern. It's this one right here in the middle, and this one here. It looks like this. Okay, so it's in the same direction. It's showing the same direction as the slip slip knit, but it has that extra little 2 little hash marks inside there, so it makes it look very different from the slip slip knit. If it was angled the other way, it would get too much looking like the knit 2 together, so it's angled this way. And we'll want to pay careful attention to that, where that changes. Now, in order to look at the chart, you're actually going to go down to the bottom, because if you think about it, as I knit on my needles, my project grows, right? So it's getting longer and longer. So if I'm working on row 1 first, and then I knit row 2, you can see better if I put a piece of paper on it. Okay, so if I start working row 1, now I have a row. When I work row 2, it looks longer, right? So as I do this, my knitting gets longer, and the chart can make sense that way. So we actually put like a sticky note right here. Actually, let me flip that around. And this makes it easier for reading the chart. So to read it, you actually start where it has the number, and this is the number 1, and you start working from right to left all the way over. Then you move on to the next row. So once you're totally complete with that row, you can pick up your paper and move it up and work on that row. If you set your knitting down and you kept your paper in the correct place, like say you set it down mid-row, oh my gosh, who would do that? But sometimes it happens, life happens. We set it down and then we're saying, where are we? Well, you'll know if you're on the right side or the wrong side, because the right side of your knitting has all these beautiful knit stitches, but on the back it has the purl stitches, which are very bumpy, and you can tell that this is very different looking than this side. Now, if you're on your seed stitch portion, you can always stick a stitch marker in the beginning if you have to put it down before you start your lace work, and you can say, okay, well, I know where this little stitch marker is. And of course, this is an extra one that I didn't show earlier. It's a locking stitch marker or removable stitch marker, so I can pull it on and off. So you can indicate which is the right side if that's easier for you. So you just continue moving this up. Now that's the basics of looking at the chart, okay? So you're going to move up to the third row, and you can see where the 3 is on the right again. So wherever you see the number, it's working from that direction and the other direction there. So this way over this way. On the 2, you're working this way. However, on all of the even rows in this pattern, they're all the same stitch. Do you see this blank square? This blank square here is actually a knit stitch, and you can see that in the key. All right. Now the key of that is knit on the right side, purl on the wrong side. So in order to get all those beautiful knit stitches on the front with this little blank box, you actually are purling on the wrong side. If this was actually a chart that had purls on it, you would see a dash. Okay, it's represented just like that, just a straight dash. So whatever you see on the chart is what it's going to look like on the right side. So if it tells you directions on the wrong side and you're flipped over on the wrong side, you need to make that stitch. You make the purls and you're on an even row. Okay, I hope that makes sense. All right, let's go over the lace pattern here. It actually talks about a multiple of 12 plus 1. What that is the width of your pattern for just the lace. The 12 is the actual lace pattern. The 1 is an extra stitch that gets you there because this pattern actually kind of shifts over. With lace work, there may be some shifting and you just have to trust the pattern because it actually ends up lining up. You just kind of keep going, but you need that extra stitch in here in the very beginning as a knit stitch in order for it to accomplish what it needs to accomplish. So you're going to start the knit 1 first, which is that plus 1, and then you see the asterisk. The asterisk is the repeated part. So you're going to have the yarn over right after, do the SSK, knit 7, K2 tog. So we got a left leaning decrease, knitting 7, then we have a right leaning decrease, then we have a yarn over, and then a knit 1, and then we repeat from that asterisk all the way across, and we would repeat until we get to our stitch marker. So in order to combine this with the seed stitch that we talked about over here, you're actually going to work 5 stitches before the stitch marker in the seed stitch, and then you do the knit 1. Okay, so even though your seed stitch may end with a knit, you still have to knit it right after that stitch marker. That's why I like putting them in here. And you'll see that when I start working my sample. And you're going to be repeating this across. Now, you want to knit a swatch so that you know how it's going to work up. And it's best to do it, not like I've done it with 1 stitch repeat here. This is 1 pattern repeat. You actually want to do it with 2. And so the sample that we're going to work up is actually 2 repeats wide. And then I'm going to show you how to make it 2 repeats long. So this is actually a 20 row pattern. We're going to work 40 rows. Okay, and then you're going to be able to see it develop just like this. So yours is going to be double this width, and I'll show you mine, and that way you can compare and look at yours versus mine in the end of the video. The stitch pattern continues on like this, and it's just the same similar stitches. They're just in different orders until you get down to here. You've got parentheses where you're repeating this part twice. And then down here, you repeat this part twice. And then the stitch that changes is further down with the SK2P. All right, so row 1, we're working from right to left. We have a knit stitch because it's blank. And then we have a red line or a bolded line, depending upon your pattern. It could just be bold and not colored. That represents the asterisk because that's where the 12 stitch repeat goes. So in your row, once you knit this one here and you complete these 12 stitches, you're going to repeat again and go back to where this part is. If you're looking at a piece of music, sometimes there's like a little symbol, and it's like for repeating. I can't even draw here, but it basically makes you repeat a certain section. So you're just going to be repeating this section here. So here is a circle, which is actually a yarn over. That's that extra piece of yarn that we put around to make up for when we decrease. So we have a left slanting angle here, and that is a left decrease, which is an SSK, a slip knit. A fun way to remember how to do this, I'm not going to say who told me because she said, don't repeat that, but I think it's funny. The left leaning decrease is liberal. So think SSKs are to the left. And then a knit two together, which is down here and it leans to the right, they're conservative. I don't know if that helps you remember, but I think it's funny. So, so anyway, let's look at this one, and then I'll show you the row 1 and you can see how this lines up. So we have a knit, then we have that asterisk, then we have the yarn over, an SSK, and then we have all these blank ones here. So let's count how many knit stitches there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if we can remember, we have knit, yarn over, SSK, knit 7, and then we have a knit 2 together and a yarn over and another blank one. So that's a knit stitch, and then it repeats. So let's go look up here at row 1, and you can see it's knit 1, then the asterisk, that's that red line, yarn over, then we have SSK, which is that left leaning decrease, goes like that, and then we have knit 7, K7, and then we have knit 2 together, so it's going over to the right, and then a yarn over, and then the knit. And then you just repeat from the asterisk part for those 12 stitches. So if you ever want to double check your count across here, you can actually count and say, okay, the yarn over is 1 stitch, the SSK makes it go down to 1, so that's 1, 2, plus your 7, that's 9, plus your knit 2 together, and then your yarn over, that's 2, so that's 10, 11, and then we have the knit 1, which is 12. So this right here is your repeat. So if I want to knit up a swatch so that I can see what this looks like, and we knit it in the recommended 2 patterns wide for a swatch so you can really see a lace pattern, then you're going to need a total of 12 plus 12 plus the 1. So you're going to need 25 stitches in the middle here. So in order to do a swatch that looks like this, we're actually going to need the extra 5 stitches that are on the ends. So 5 plus 5 is 10, plus the 25 for the middle here. So we're going to cast on 35 stitches for a swatch. So 35 stitches cast on for our swatch. Okay, and that will give us 2 repeats. So 2 pattern repeats wide. Okay, that's what we're doing here. In order to get our full blanket, you'll need to cast on 95 stitches, and you'll do it the same way repeated across. Okay, you just keep doing that repeat. I'm writing this down because I think this is helpful for you, and if you want to put your piece of paper here and take notes for yourself, you can do that. Whenever you're done with row 1, you just pick your paper up and move it up, and then you work a row 2. So you work from left to right, going all the way across, purling, because you want the right side to be knit and the wrong side to be purl. So if you purl on this side, it will form all these knit stitches across. Again, it's represented up here in the key. We're going to knit on the right side and purl on the wrong side. Okay, and then when you're done with the row 2, Then you'll move your paper up. And you've got row 3 working again from right to left. And you'll see right here we've got, so let's do a little pop quiz, see if you can catch this. So we have knit 1, and then we have the asterisk, knit 1 here. And then it moves on with the row. Yarn over, SSK, knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, knit 2 together because it's right leaning, yarn over, and then we have knit 2, and then you repeat to the asterisk. If we didn't repeat to the asterisk and if this red line wasn't here, then we go all the way over here. So you won't see in row 3, you won't see knit 2, you'll see knit 1 and then an asterisk and knit 1. So let's go over here again and see. So we're going to go over to row 3. We've got knit 1, there's that asterisk, we've got a knit 1, and then we have yarn over, SSK, there's those knit 5 that we counted, and then we have K2 tog, knit 2 together, and then yarn over, and then we have the knit 2, and then we repeat to this knit 1. That's it. So you can kind of pop quiz yourself and look at these and see if you interpreted this right, and then check over here. So if you want to start learning how to read the pattern by chart, it's really easy. If the language changes, you can look at a chart and look at the key and kind of figure it out. Sometimes people have a little bit different symbols, but you can kind of figure them out just by studying the chart. But do you see how all these here, all the K2 togs are leaning this way, okay? They're leaning to the right, and then the knit, the SSK is going to the left, and then you have all these circles here, and that represents all that open stitch work. All right, so let's begin by casting on. We'll cast on our 35 stitches, and we'll get started. So grab your supplies. I'll see you soon. This concludes part 1 of our video. Please move on to part 2. Click on the link in the description to get that video. See you soon. Thanks for joining us today, where we help you stitch your love and love your stitches.